Through the Gates is produced under the support of the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management to enhance, promote, and defend the North American model of wildlife conservation and responsible wildlife management. That's our mission. We're engaged in fighting at every level so that wildlife management remains science-based and conservation continues to work for our wildlife. To learn more and join the movement, visit SaveTheHuntColorado.com. The North American model of wildlife conservation is the greatest conservation model in the world. It's a success story that should be shared and celebrated because everybody is a part of it. We're here for another episode, the weekly update on Through the Gates to Save the Hunt. And today we've got Luke Weidel with Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management, the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, and Colorado Wildlife Conservation Project. And we've also got Justin Nolan, who is also affiliated with a variety of different things, including CRWM and an owner of Minturn Anglers. So, Luke, I'll start with you. Introduce yourself and give us a little bit of background.
Yeah, my name is Luke Weidel. I sit on CRWM's board. I'm also a statewide policy volunteer for the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. I work closely with the Denver chapter, planning our local banquets and things like that. Professionally, I run a charter fishing business in Southeast Alaska. We've done that. Me and my family have done that for 24 years. I used to longline fish and crew on bigger boats. So I'm seasonally in Alaska for 3 to 5 months a year, something like that. Live in Colorado the rest of the time.
And family of?
I've got 5 kids. So that makes us what? Family of 7.
Yeah, so like a basketball team with a coach and a trainer.
Yeah. I've got whatever you want, all ages, whatever, boys, girls. Well, I only have one boy. I've got one boy, 4 girls from 12 to 2. So my life is busy. It's crazy.
And you're up in Alaska how often?
In the summer months, so May to September with a couple breaks.
From what you've done over the course of the last 15 or 16 months, tell people how your life has changed of being able to try to live the life of glory with Alaska and ballot initiatives and dealing with things at the legislature and just trying to turn around and do what you do.
Yeah, so all that wildlife-related work that we just talked about is all volunteer stuff, but it's as my kids get older, and now my oldest daughter is of big game hunting age in the state of Colorado, and she had a couple hunts this year. It makes me realize just how important it is for, as a sportsman, to kind of see that all of this is done right. And so the whole role of this advocacy that that I've been a part of for the last 16, 18 months intensely, and probably 6-8 years before that, but helping CRWM and others fight Proposition 127 and deal with all the craziness at the legislature and some pretty intense things that we're fighting at the commission level as well. I think having kids and trying to do all that stuff at once, the only reason that's even possible for me with a busy schedule is because it means so much that my kids are involved in this stuff and that they have the opportunity to hunt and fish in the state of Colorado, should they continue to choose that.
Your wife's an author,
mm-hmm.
and the kids and your wife go to Alaska with you every summer.
Yep.
That's got to be an interesting experience just to be able to get to Alaska on a plane with 5 kids in today's environment.
It is. We started, like I said, I've been doing this for 24 years, but as we continue to have our family continue to grow, they all come up with us. So we have a place there in Alaska, and, what would be really interesting is to live stream one of those flights, from Denver, Seattle to Southeast Alaska.
A small mini series.
Yeah, but nowadays we have to break it up. So we go to a hotel around SeaTac and let the kids swim in the pool and stuff and order pizza. Otherwise, it's unbelievable.
Then you drink.
I mean, you have to drink a little bit anyway. Yeah. It's an intense day or two for sure.
I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're going to have a little bit of an updated conversation here, and so we'll get into Justin Nolan with Minturn Anglers. Justin, kind of give us a little bit of background of what you do and how you got involved in all this stuff.
Yeah. I I sometimes like to joke that I blame Luke for getting involved in some of this stuff here. So I'm with Minturn Anglers. I've been in the fishing and hunting landscape since I moved to Colorado. I originally grew up in Maryland and then moved out here, kind of pursuing that Western lifestyle, the freedoms to hunt and fish. A little bit more regulated, not as much opportunities, even just from a landscape standpoint in Maryland. You really had to work for it, seek it out, and was always enamored with the West. Just, that, like I mentioned earlier, that perceived freedom that I could hunt and fish and chase my passions. But since moving out here, I've been with Minturn Anglers. We are one of the state's largest outfitters for fly fishing trips. And we're also a retail shop. So we've got 2 locations, both on the Denver Front Range and the Vail Valley. But one of my biggest passions and over the last 10 years I've pursued as a hobby/mini career is big game outfitting and guiding. And that has opened me up to kind of the conservation piece of hunting and fishing, and I just got more and more involved. I also was sitting on the steering committee with Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, helping plan some of our banquets. That's where Luke and I met and kind of formulated a friendship as well. And realizing as you start to look at some of these things and almost, pulling the veil back on how wildlife is managed in our state and seeing how much politics kind of got involved with it. You first go from being confused, outraged, mad a little bit, to, oh, wow, this is something that I need to participate in if our voices are going to be heard. And so over the years, as we've met Dan and now serving on the board of Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management, I'd say you both keep me pretty busy. But yeah. It's definitely something that I wholeheartedly believe in, and happy to serve a part of.
Well, I appreciate both you guys attending today, but we're going to try to make you honorary spokespeople on a regular basis, and because even though you're involved with the association, even though you're involved in so many different things from the legislature to the commission, you're good messengers to the general public, and you carry a big stick, and you got a lot of value that you bring to the table, and I think it's imperative to have community organizers, sportsmen and women organizations realize that it's not about one person, it's not about one organization, it's not about one subject matter. It's about everybody that has a passion and desire to be able to turn around and prop that up. And because you guys are part of RMEF and we're all part of different organizations, but your heart and soul has been eaten up the last 15, 18 months because of CRWM and what we've had to deal with. I wanted to bring you guys on board to where the general public, our community, could understand how volatile the landscape is from a different perspective, bring some different voices in, and also bring some different observational anecdotes in as well. So we're going to get into a little bit of a conversation about the current landscape that we deal with, and some of these issues will come out, and we're hoping to make them timely. But, on the coattails of 127, most people thought, oh, you won, victory, agony of defeat for the opposition, and we're all done, and we're good to go, and we can do whatever the hell they want. That's not been the case since November 5th, has it, Luke?
No. And I'll just go back to one thing you said with respect to CRWM. I've been very involved in the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation for, the better part of a decade. But when I first was introduced to you and this concept of an organization which was not necessarily a membership organization, but one that had the capability and whose mission included kind of collaboratively taking up the cause of fighting for what we believe in and fighting for what works with respect to conservation, and an alliance, so to speak, or a collaboration that all of these organizations could participate in, from turkeys to pheasants to, BHA and TRCP and whoever else, elks, mule deer. And so that was really attractive to me. And I think that it was timely, the creation of CRWM, but also was and is well suited to fight on behalf of all hunters and anglers, not for necessarily hunters and anglers, but for wildlife and for wildlife conservation. So yeah, back to your question about post 127, no, it has not been the case. No, what happened with the proponents of Proposition 127, which was previously Initiative 91, is that now they've shifted focus to the commission, thinking that they'll make changes to the commission and subsequently or effectively to the agency itself and how we manage 961 species of wildlife in the state. And so that focus, in my view, has been I don't know how to put it, chaotic, but requires our attention. And so now we shift to putting ourselves before the policy-making body, which is an 11-member Parks and Wildlife Commission in Colorado. And it's very important that we do so.
Well, not only is it important, it's imperative to make sure that you don't lose any ground. And as we saw the other day when we were on a conference call together with a particular representative here, there's individuals that want to change the makeup of the way the agency actually can or shall or may manage wildlife in the state of Colorado. And so for those people that don't know, things that are happening in Colorado are similar to what now they've been brought up in Arizona and in New Mexico. Matter of fact, I think House Bill 2552 is up in Arizona today, the 10th of February. This will air after that. But you look at what's going on in Washington, look at what's going on in California again, and in Oregon. Now they're bringing things up in eastern states. These are the things that the average general sportsman and woman doesn't comprehend until it's either there and done and gone, but they don't have the ability to prepare for it because it's not in their wheelhouse. What has happened since November 5th here is the oppositions, the proponents of 127, came out in full force, not willing to acknowledge the defeat of 127 by a margin of 10.5 percentage points. They came out and said, that's just a mandate for the commission to turn around and do what we want them to do, and what the voters that voted for 127, that you should do this, because that wasn't really a loss. It was a gain, and you could see that these people want you to do that.
And it's particularly, troublesome or annoying, frustrating that they, I don't know if that's the right way to describe it, but that's what it feels like, that the proponents of 127 are able to sort of even state that. It's just not appropriate that they can say, well, we had this huge defeat of Proposition 127, like you said, 10.5 point spread. But that's not really what the voters meant. They meant they wanted reform, but not in this way. No, then they should have asked the voter that question. Mm-hmm. What they chose to ask the voter said no to. And it's as simple as that. That what the voter intended was for management responsibility to be with the agency, to be with wildlife professionals that have like an 80-some% approval rating overall. They intended for policy setting to be at the commission level and within the agency. And they didn't, and full stop.
So, Justin, from your perspective of what you've watched, what you participated in, did you think that it was going to be easy peasy after November 5th and everybody was going to go away and we would start to rebuild on something? Or did you realize that it was going to be that contentious literally the day after and then 2 weeks after at the commission meeting in November?
Well, I would have liked to believe that it would have been easy peasy, but the reality and everything we've dealt with on this landscape through this administration, you knew it was not going to be easy peasy. Mm-hmm. I think what's really frustrating for me is you go to the commission meetings and you're listening to the narratives that are being put forth, and it's just this double standard. Mm-hmm. The very same proponents that are here arguing, saying that this was not a mandate by the people, use those exact same words when it came to Proposition 114.
That it was a mandate.
That it was a mandate. Yeah. So you look at this from the outside, and it confuses you. If you're not in the everyday weeds of this, you don't really know. You're looking at this, and whatever soundbite gets pulled up. But I see it as an effort to muddy the waters, almost being a sore loser mm-hmm. in a sense. But again, we talk about these efforts, and we have 961 species to manage in this state, and I think we've done a pretty good job. I don't know of any species that's ever gone extinct or been neglected at the hands of CPW. But you watch the efforts, and I look at it, and we go to commission meetings, and how much time is just dominated through public testimony. And I'm not saying that we don't have the right for everyone to have public testimony, but the agenda is so driven by carnivores and the proponents of these measures trying to kind of, muddy the waters and muck everything up. And it's becoming a disservice to the agency. It's making things dysfunctional. And so I knew that these fights were going to still be there. But to watch it being spun, that the people of Colorado want change. When I followed their campaign and I looked at all the materials, I mean, they pulled out every stop. There wasn't one stone unturned they didn't use anything. They used every tool that they could to reframe mountain lion management as a barbaric, archaic form for trophy hunters with no scientific reasons for harvest of mountain lions. So all of those narratives and all of those utilization tools that we have at our disposal at CPW and the biologists can employ, all of those were fleshed out, in my opinion, in the court of public approval. Mm-hmm. And the voters had a chance to take that. And when you said 10.5%, I believe that the voters understood everything. I think while they might have been ignorant to mountain lion management in Colorado, I think this last election cycle, we did a pretty good job of educating, and our message from the start was, don't listen to us. Listen to the experts at CPW. Listen to the management that has taken place since 1965 and how we manage the species and why certain tools are for benefit of mountain lions. And so to see that all play out, I as Luke mentioned, full stop. I don't buy into this perspective that the public didn't want to see it in a ballot measure. They wanted to see change at the commission level. I believe things are best left at the commission level. But this idea that there's a public mandate to change things holistically, I don't buy it. And I think it's just going to get more contentious as you see these groups reformulate and try to come back.
We talked about the science and we talked about the experts. And what we're going to show is the video clip from the January commission meeting.
And I think I remember you saying in a previous presentation that some states don't use hounds, but the states that don't use hounds actually have a higher female harvest rate than we do, or showing states that use hounds that hounds actually help prevent a higher harvest rate. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, you are. I can use some really general numbers. Oregon and Washington are the two states that have lost the use of hounds. So we can look to them, and we did talk about this in November, for what their total female harvest looks like. Those states are just using deer and elk hunters, the ability to sell tens of thousands of land licenses to hunters that are already on the landscape that are hunting deer and elk that might opportunistically harvest a lion. Those female harvest rates are in the 50, overall females in the 50%, sometimes getting as high as 60%. And I did want to kind of emphasize one thing that I don't know if folks are aware that mountain lions aren't on the landscape in a 50-50 proportion. Particularly in hunted lion populations, there are far more females on the landscape. That's how they regulate themselves, and with hunting, there's more females on the landscape. So if you were to be walking across the landscape without dogs, opportunistically encountering lions, much higher chances of coming across a female lion, and in those states, harvesting it. So to have 66, I'm broadly speaking here, 66%, 2 to 1, 66% of your lion population is female, 33% is male.
Yeah, so, we talked about the experts. And listen to the data and the statistics and the science. And Mark Vieira there with Colorado Parks and Wildlife is the carnivore fur bearer biologist. He's the manager. When we did presentations and when we did public events, we often said, to Justin's point, don't listen to us and don't listen to the antis. Listen to the experts. And I think that message probably carried a significant amount of weight, not only to the general public, but to another component of the governing body there with Colorado Parks and Wildlife with the commission. So pop that other video up, please.
And Jay, I have a question for you. Actually, last year, I believe, you went on a hunt with hounds, and you had a very favorable experience. Would you like to tell us about that?
Sure. I went not on a consumptive hunt, so there was no killing. It was just I wanted to see what the experience was like, and I went out to help tranquilize a lion to put a radio collar on it. And there are things that, well, I don't know if everyone's that interested in my personal reflections, but I'll give you just two really quick. GPS collars, which are frequently criticized, have two functions that are brought up. One is to avoid trespassing on other people's land. Well-trained dogs can be back by us giving them a signal to the GPS collar, and if the lion is being pursued, goes on to property where the hunter doesn't have permission, he can retrieve his dogs with the GPS collar. So it has, I would call that a beneficial attribute. The other is dog safety. Sometimes the dogs get separated. You can't auditorily really figure out where the dogs all are because that sound bounces around canyons and stuff. So you can know if you've lost a dog from your group of dogs because you have your GPS calling. On the flip side, it does make the whole experience easier at play because you wait till your dot stops and then you figure out how to hike to that location. But at least in this instance, it was still quite an exhausting hike. And so it wasn't a just get out of your truck and shoot a stationary animal. It was a very challenging hike.
So I think, and that's just part of that meeting. And if anybody would like to go back and review any of the Colorado Parks and Wildlife meetings, they can do so on the YouTube channel. And they're recorded both days. And you can find out from the agenda item if they stick to the agenda or where you actually want to get that information. Sometimes they're way behind on the agenda, but you get an idea if you look at the agenda on the CPW website at cpw.state.co.us, and then you go to the commission page and find out where those meetings are. The reason we're bringing it up now is because these have continually been topics of conversation prior to the ballot election on November 5th and subsequent to. And when you have the experts, like with Mark Vieira with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and have them giving this public information webinar session, and then you see commissioners like Commissioner Touchton that is giving his personal reflection on an experience that he had that goes in the face of the lies and the deceits and the falsehoods of the antis that were proposing 127. And you see an individual from his personal perspective bring it up and talk about the collars and talk about the retrieval and talk about the interaction and and it can be fully viewed in totality on the YouTube side of it. But you guys are at enough commission meetings and you see enough interaction at a variety of different levels. The component of the antis participation, I say antis, animal rights extremists, the people that don't like us, that don't like hunting, that for the most part don't like Colorado Parks and Wildlife, they don't like consumptive use. From what happened prior to the election day on November 5th and what has happened since then, has there been any change in tone or narrative at all?
No. I mean, you mean from the like proponents of things like 127? Mm-hmm. I think that they're really kind of reaching, they like we alluded to earlier, now their goal is to sort of, kind of bombard the agency and therefore the commission with all sorts of sensationalized things that have nothing to do with what is actually happening in presentations from Mark Vieira, the carnivore biologist,
Because they talk about the science all the time, but here's the science, but they just don't like this.
No, they
science.
ignore this portion of it.
Exactly.
And that they ignore this portion of it. They put out a few sound bites, and you get public commenters and presenters that are largely coming, commenting virtually. And you see, the same kind of 1, 2, 3 taglines in their comments, and they have nothing to do with the real science that's happening, the real research that is being created and from things like Jay's talking about, like Commissioner Tushin's talking about, and like Mark's presenting to the commission. So I'd have to think about that a little more. Justin, you had
if I
some.
could add a little context,
you bet.
I'll take a step back to, you've mentioned this a million times. I think they ran into a buzzsaw with the efforts of CRWM and the 127 campaign. They ran into a buzzsaw that they had never seen. I think they expected to run this ballot initiative to run on the lies and fallacies and elicit that emotional response from the uneducated public. As you've mentioned, Dan, I think there was some buyer's remorse with Proposition 114.
The wolf issue.
In the wolf issue. And I think that the general public, while they might not be, interested or up to date with all the daily interactions and that we as hunters and anglers encounter on a daily basis, I think they're waking up to really what is science-based wildlife management. But to go back, before the election, I believe they thought this was just going to pass, that they could say anything they wanted to the general public, use these heightened, sensational, and emotional pleas to pass the vote. When they met resistance, they were scrambling. And if we look at like September, I think it was September of 2024, all of a sudden, I tried to pay attention to the CATS campaign, and all of a sudden you started seeing more and more webinars, more and more, I think, there was a little bit of a panic and desperation mode. And Mr. Pacelli, our favorite individual, he held a Zoom meeting, and I registered for this Zoom meeting, and I watched this Zoom meeting. And they couldn't talk about the science. They tried to refute it. They tried to, and they kept calling everyone bloodthirsty and goons and using names, just trying to reframe everything and using disparaging remarks. But one of the things that stuck with me, the science, the actual boots on the ground, the biologists, we had, all these different things coming out that biologists, while CPW couldn't comment on it, you had the professional organization that came out against ballot initiatives. And one of the things that Mr. Pacelli and Wayne said on his thing was, well, they claim they have scientists, but we have the real scientists.
Yeah.
And he put down the biologists at Colorado Parks and Wildlife.
Which they continually do.
And saying, who are they?
Yeah.
They just have, and he said this, and we could probably go back and find it, where he said, okay, maybe they have a few biologists with a college degree, but we have biologists with doctorates. So all of a sudden, in my opinion, I take that as you're trying to reshift it. Mm-hmm. You don't agree with the science, and so now it has to be your science. It has to be your peer-reviewed scientists. And they're continually trying to discredit Mr. Vieira. I think, Chair May, as many times, if you watch these commission meetings, has to step in and has to kind of control public comment, because what's happening is you've got these groups like Wildlife for All putting out this, basically it's just a bullet pointed, here's what you need to say at the commission level to refute all of the boots on the ground science. Luckily, I do, as we saw with Proposition 127, the public saw through that and voted accordingly. But yeah, I think you asked the question of where are we going from 127, and I'm probably butchering that, excuse me, but they're going to now say that the scientists we have is not the best available science.
Well, and to that point, going into the conversation that Luke and I were part of just last week with individuals that are trying to run a bill that will change the statutory makeup of the way Colorado Parks and Wildlife manages wildlife. And instead of shall utilize hunting, fishing, trapping as the primary management tool, they want to change the word to may. And then if anybody had listened to the last interaction with Commissioner Touchton on the Colorado Wildlife Conservation Project, when I asked him as an attorney, he's an attorney, so legal terms, what's the difference between shall and may? And he said, well, this makes you do it, and that over there allows you to do it if you feel like you want to. That goes into the science side of the opposition, to where they don't like the science from Colorado Parks and Wildlife. They don't like the data and the statistics and the studies and the facts that they provide. They want their information out there. And I think that those are talking points that we'll continually be able to capitalize on over the course of the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, until the end of the legislative session. And with the commission meetings coming up, I do want to mention that March 5th and 6th, at 6060 Broadway in Denver, Colorado, and on YouTube. There's another Parks and Wildlife Commission meeting, and there's going to be a variety of different subjects. We're going to do some updates between now and then that talk about wolves, and it talks about the regurgitating of the wolf conversation. And just to kind of wrap up this conversation here in the short break, if you guys could tell people in other states what to be aware of just because you got a small victory, just because something went in your favor, what would you give them as a recommendation, not just to walk away from something and not just take it for granted?
What we've seen here in Colorado is a can of worms that's not going away. And there's this there's this continued disconnect that's ongoing between the population of our state, almost 6 million people, and those that hunt and fish. And so what's happening is these activists, we'll just call them that. I mean, because as an aside, when was the last time you heard somebody who, we'll call them the antis, the animal rights extremists, somebody who's commenting on behalf of that worldview? When was the last time you heard somebody give Colorado Parks and Wildlife a positive public comment?
Besides us.
Yeah, no, it doesn't happen. It's actually, and it's unfortunate because it's gotten to a level where it's all about name calling. I mean, like actual name calling.
Yes. I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, right.
I mean, what has gone on about name calling in the last 14 months?
Where we're called killers and just nasty, all sorts of nasty things.
Say on here.
Yeah.
And we could on the podcast, but we don't want to.
Right. And so they're trying. They, meaning the proponents of 127 and so forth, are trying to garner support among people who are caught in that disconnect between what's working, hunting and fishing, what funds conservation. They're trying to garner support within that population of people who are disconnected from the way that we actually get our food and the way that wildlife is managed. And so it's actually a huge question. I don't know this question about what our advice would be for people in other states.
Because it's happening everywhere right now with legislators.
Yeah,
and commissions.
it's happening everywhere.
Yeah, every single Western state has got something on the docket.
I think we need to show there's a huge group of people in the middle, 70-some%, maybe even higher, that are supportive of hunting and fishing, especially in terms of how it relates to food sources and lean wild game that's healthy protein, and how that funds conservation. Because nothing else really does. Nothing else has to date. Nothing else works. And that's the other problem with these folks, is they're not proposing ever anything positive. They're just suing, calling people nasty names, saying we just need to leave this alone.
Petitions, ballot initiatives,
you name it.
Yeah.
And so I think our responsibility, I mean, from the perspective of CRWM and what we've done with a positive message, is it's all about a positive message. It's all about sort of ignoring the fringe and concentrating on the people in the middle, the people who are supportive of this stuff, the people who are reasonable, and you can actually have a conversation with. And that involves education. It involves education about how hunting and fishing funds wildlife. I mean, that's what it does. In our message at CRWM, in all of these various conservation works, the actual conservation groups, is about what works and how hunting and fishing works for wildlife. We're not trying to convince people that they have to agree with it, but that it is what works.
If you want to support a company that supported the efforts to defeat Proposition 127, then you need to support Davis Tent. Davis Tent has provided quality canvas goods for outdoorsmen for the last 50 plus years. For more information, go to davistent.com. If you want to support another business that was instrumental in helping us defeat Proposition 127, check out Salida Gun Shop. Salida Gun Shop in Salida, Colorado provides quality products, expertise, and knowledge from individuals that actually do what they sell. Go to SalidaGunshop.com. Listen to the advice of Cameron Haynes and support companies that are supporting your cause and your efforts. Minturn Anglers is one of those companies. Minturn Anglers provides product and fishing excursions in Colorado and are second to none. For more information, go to minturnanglers.com.
Boy, Luke, you said a couple
Sorry,
things there.
I don't know if I really
No,
answered.
Or you
a
could be
lot of
like
good-
some people we know and say, I agree with
lot
what
of
Luke
good
says.
points.
And then,
I think if we talk about other states, and I would ask people to educate yourself. There was a comment at the last commission meeting, and when we started talking about mountain lion hunting, well, I never knew this existed, and I didn't know. I hear that, and I hear two things. Well, you didn't know because what the management that is being employed by our state wildlife agencies is working. We have rich, beautiful landscapes. The antis will tell you that it's some Mad Max barren wasteland where everything's going extinct. But I think our wildlife agencies, while we can be critical at times and we think, we can help offer criticism to improve, they're doing a really good job. And if you look at our message in the North American model of wildlife conservation, it's a success story. We've brought multiple species back from extinction, and we manage these landscapes. Our state agencies manage these landscapes for everyone's benefit. Whether you're a non-consumptive user, you're not a hunter or fisherman, but you like to hike, you like to snowshoe, we have beautiful landscapes. All as a result from the North American model of wildlife conservation, and we should all celebrate that. I think what happens sometimes and why people should be paying attention is we focus too much on an individual animal, and the antis like to focus on an individual animal and use that for heightened ways to rile you up. We do manage these species from a macro level. We manage them for the betterment of the entire species. So understanding the way how wildlife is managed and how we are here to perpetuate them for the future and make sure that none of them go extinct, and really educating, why am I being asked for things to be changed? Is it not working? And really taking a step back and looking at it. And I think a lot of people would be kind of surprised, my peers, my wife's peers, who don't pay attention to wildlife management during the 127 campaign, come up to me and always say, wow, I didn't know there's this much goes into it. And had I just taken everything for face value that was being told to me by the proponents of 127, I wouldn't have known. So educating yourself on the processes that go through the commission level and really look at it. What has your game agencies done? I think if you look anyone in any state, you probably find more good than bad. And I think that's something we should celebrate, continue to improve upon, and be wary, because the antis, their worldview is to completely blow this model up with no management. And what is that going to look like in 50 years from now if we don't have active management on the landscape?
Well, and to that point, and we're going to have much broader conversations as we continually move forward with this venue. The format that was given to us was meant to be able to continue the message, be able to continue communicating to maybe followers or maybe non-followers that become followers, but just to educate the general public in some capacity. And we've got the industry on our side now. We've got the sportsmen and women on our side. Colorado Parks and Wildlife is on our side, even though they're strangled and tongue-tied because of the gubernatorial administration here. But, I appreciate you guys getting on today, and we're going to have other conversations, but I'm going to try to include you on a regular basis for some of the shorts and the updates, just to make sure that we got a little bit different perspective, and hopefully we can make a dent in education and people find it informational enough. So look forward to that conversation. Appreciate your guys' attention to the matter, your valiant effort and gallant effort to be able to turn around and do what we do, and look forward to continuing on.
Thanks, Dan.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Through the Gates. For more content like this, make sure that you like, follow, and subscribe on all of our channels.